Hi, Carolina.
Hi, Natalie.
How are you?
I'm good.
Just an introduction. I'm Nathalie Alfonso. I was born in Colombia and moved to Miami when I was 18. Since then, I've been living in between Broward and Miami, and now I'm part of the exhibition with Carolina Cueva, Dimensions Variable. So I think we're going to be talking about the works that we're presenting there. So, hi, Carolina, again.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
Good. So could you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I'm Carolina. I was born in Lima, Peru, and I came to the United States when I was 3 years old. Yeah, I've been, raised in Miami since I was three. I went to college in New York City. I went to School of Visual Arts. And now I've been living here since I think 2011.
Mm. I was a little bit sad that I missed the performance that you did with Eddie
Oh,
at Piero Achugarri. So I was always very curious to get to know your practice, and I was very happy to see that you had the works that you had at Dimensions Variable when they invited us to the exhibitions. So can you talk about a little bit of the two works that you presented in this exhibition?
sure. I have a sculpture and a painting in the exhibition, and both works. Most of my work deals a lot with um, loss, displacement, identity, preservation. I'm very like process oriented. So I really have this kind of intuitive way of working. A lot of times I'm not exactly, sure how it's going to come out or how I'm going to, exactly what I'm making. There's like a loose investigation. Like there's a lot of it that I'm researching and thinking about, but at the same time, when I'm actually working and making art or working with these different materials, it's really like process oriented.
Do
So
you, sorry.
no, yeah, so the two works deal a little bit with that. The two works are actually based on a drawing. And I've been drawing a lot more, especially since the pandemic. I draw a lot, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a drawer or someone that would, you know, just work in that medium. It's kind of more almost like a journaling for me, but visually. And I started working on these just drawings. And one of the drawings, the sculpture is based on a drawing I did from like 2016 or something that I always wanted to make into a sculpture. So a lot of times when I draw, it's because I don't really have a space, like an actual physical space to make. I mean, because you work in so much labor intensive and sculptural, and these are things you can't necessarily do in like your home space. You need to have like some other space to work in it. And so it's it's just because of a lack of space that I mostly do a lot of drawings too. And there tend to be things that I want to create into sculptures, but I don't necessarily have the space to do it. So I draw it for like these, that I want to realize one day. So both of these, that sculpture is based on the drawing that I did a while ago. And the painting is based on the drawing too, but it's really like exploring this kind of like imagery or like symbols of many things like Andean cosmology, parts of like history, my own personal narrative growing up. Not representing anything, but kind of just evoking it a little bit, but the sculpture ties in with it too. I think they're both, I think that's why probably they chose both of those to go together in the exhibition.
Yeah, and actually, I really thought that the sculpture that you presented was very interesting because it kind of gives this idea of like the totem or like the object that you have to look at, but it doesn't have any like it doesn't necessarily represent either gender or or necessarily color, or it's kind of more of those, to me, more ancestral ceramic works that were a little bit more anthropomorphic in a way. And this is not so much anthropomorphic, but do you feel like it is important to you that these characters don't show that?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I don't really like to make things that are really too literal. And it's weird because for a while I kind of made things that were more like abstract, but then I was like really interested for some reason in like the body. And I think it's been around the time that I started doing performance art with Jahaira. I don't consider myself a performance artist. It's just that came about from Jahaira and me just having this like really deep connection, to our South and Central American indigenous ancestry. And so it's really for this like higher purpose. Like it's this really like amazing like collaborative experience that we have. But I think I started thinking more about the body. And so I started creating more sculptures in clay that have like a body, like, so,
Yeah.
which is interesting because I never never really, I was always kind of weary of like touching the body because it's so literal, when you put a body, it's always representing someone or something, where I kind of like things to be a little bit more abstract. But if you go too abstract, then, it's always kind of like writing that line, I think.
And this is only one sculpture, right? It's not like a series that you have, or like a number. This is a particular one that you decided to present for this exhibition, right?
Well, Anita is actually the one that reached out to me, Anita Shorma. She reached out to me saying that Francis and Layden were interested in being, for me to be part of the exhibition. So I sent them a few different sculptures, which were made around the same time that I made this one. And I think I sent them like a few other things, and then they chose these two.
Do you want to give us maybe a little bit of description for the people who haven't seen the artwork?
Sure. So the sculpture, it's untitled, but it's I kind of see it like a little, like a vessel almost. It has it's made out of clay, it's ceramic, but I don't use glaze. I use paint, acrylic paint. Well, actually, for that one, I use watercolor, which is, I don't know why, but I just use watercolor. I kind of tend to use whatever paints I have flying around, and then so then it's a pot, like the top, or where the head would be like it's like a pot, and then it has a body, but it's almost like a half body, half mountain. But it could be seen as many other ways. I've had people tell me it looks like something else. So
yeah, I saw it the first time. When I saw it, I was thinking a lot about like this idea of a cape, or like, I don't know, for some reason, a superhero that, has no face or something, but it's like present in a way. And it makes me think a lot of how we, or not we, but in, in my family, or in some cultures, how we kind of look at objects that, have to kind of accompany us in the house. Yeah. Like these deities that are standing there kind of to protect us or something. So it made me think a lot about that.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking about that idea, like when I was making it, kind of like almost like a muse or something, or some kind of like trying to receive some kind of message or something. But yeah.
And the painting?
Oh, the painting, right? Well, the painting is pretty large. It's like, I think 4 feet by, I don't know, 4 feet by 5 feet or something. And I used acrylic paint, some different like gel mediums, molding pastes. There's a lot of different layers on it. And the imagery on there is, there's like a long braid. There's also the pot again, and there's kind of like these square staircase looking things. There's also like this huge line going through that snake-like line going through.
And did you make that, like that painting has a conversation with the small figure, or they're two different artworks?
They're made at different times, months apart, but I think I was still kind of thinking of the same, you know, it's all kind of within the same idea, but they weren't made back to back. They weren't really made to go together or nothing, but you know.
So, okay. Do you have any questions for me?
For your work? Yeah. Well, just if you first want to talk a little bit about your, I mean, I know a little bit about your work, you know, but what, you know, all the stuff that, or the work that you do, you can't really tell from the actual physical artwork that you have there, really. And I know that's really what your work's about. So if you want to kind of talk more about that.
Yeah, well, this particular work that was selected for this exhibition, it's actually one of the fragments of these large quilts that I did when I was doing the performance of the Black Line. I don't know if you saw that performance, but I did that performance 6 times in different locations. And the idea of that performance was that I drew a solid line of black charcoal across the room. Sometimes, you know, I did it once, like in a 200 feet long in front of a mall. Another time I did it inside of a gallery. Another time I did it in front of like inside of a small room. But basically the drawing was placed in front of my face because this idea of scrubbing the charcoal was kind of my exercise of self-portrait and kind of understanding where this need of cleaning and this obsession with like making things perfect all the time came from. And through that work is when I realized that it was influenced by everything I learned through my mother, who is a housekeeper, and being in Miami when I was in my undergrad, deciding to be a housekeeper as well. So that became kind of my connection between drawing and cleaning. And the first time when I ended up having all these rags full of charcoal, when you open them up, they actually look like very abstract paintings, but I was very interested in this idea of having an abstract mark that came from the action of scrubbing and trying to remove. And then I recall this memory, you know, these things with this particular work. What happened was that, you know how you kind of bury some memories and you don't even, you know, you don't even recall that they're still there. But then suddenly when you're making a painting or when you're working in the studio, they show up like, you know, like, oh, wow, that happened when I was a little kid and I just completely forgot about it. So what happened was I had this pile of rags full of charcoal in the studio, not knowing what to do with them. And the first decision I took was to start ironing them. And people were telling me when they saw the rags, as they were like crinkled and like, you know, after a rag is dry and dirty, that they loved that it was like this. And I was like, no, they need to be flat and perfect for some reason. But when I actually started ironing, I remember that was basically one of my closest relationship to my mother growing up. Like because she was always a living housekeeper, basically she would live in the house of the families, you know. She would only come home Saturday and Sunday, and those were the days that she would have to come and clean, like, and do our clothes, because back then it wasn't like laundry, like washer and dryer. So she would come and do it with her hands, and the next day she would iron everything. So when I got those rags, I was like ironing them, and I remember that, and I just thought it was such a beautiful. I mean, it was silly that it was kind of like the only one of the few memories I have from her growing up. But at the same time, it was great that they suddenly became quilts. For me, that became like this idea of the maternal object that we carry, that we have in the house, with the difference that is no longer functional, because a quilt, of course, is functional. You kind of reuse pieces to make use again, but I made it intentionally non-functional, just to kind of recall this memory, like stay, kind of try to trap that memory in that particular moment. So the rags that are in that exhibition are just a fragment, because all the quilts are super big. They're like, let me see, 2 4, like 20 feet wide by 17. So they're very difficult to show, because of course they require a very large space. So usually I don't show them open. I show them either folded or like in different things. So the ones at dimensions variable right now, they're only 3. Like they're just a little piece that I cut out, kind of separated for a moment, and yeah.
Well, I feel like I deeply resonate with your work. My family, like my dad and mom, they've always worked in well, like my mom started being like a housekeeper, like a maid when she was 13 in Peru and stuff. And
Same, my mom.
she's lived the same thing, like with the family, that she's cleaning for, cooking and all of that. And my father, he's retired now, but he was a janitor when they came here from like the US and stuff, or from Peru to the US. And so I definitely feel like a connection to that. I want to ask, like, where does this sort of well, just because you're saying that you're doing the performance and you're doing this charcoal drawing and then like cleaning it, where do you think like this sort of like idea of like repetition or like obsession almost, because it seems a little like kind of obsessive, not in a negative or positive way. I'm just like saying, like, because you say you've done it many many times.
What was interesting to me is that when I came to the United States at 18, basically my dad kind of prepared everything for me and my brother to be able to come here with papers and to go directly to college and to learn English. And when I was living in Bogota before coming here, I didn't necessarily work. I was working in Colombia, but more because I wanted to have a reason to be out of the house, you kind of have the permit to be outside doing other things. But when I came here and I started going to school and having all these jobs, I was a cashier at Home Depot. I was a cashier at Restaurant Depot, like working with all these, food and all of this. 2 years later, I realized that I was so obsessed with cleaning all the time. It was kind of almost impossible to remove me from cleaning, in the sense that even when I was working at Home Depot, I remember, when there is no too much traffic of people, I would start cleaning absolutely every single little thing of the register. And so I decided, I started kind of getting into understanding how the business of cleaning works here. And then I realized that when you clean houses, you actually make like almost triple the money that you make working for a corporation in those kinds of jobs. And because I really wanted to be spending more time in the studio, I decided just to quit the corporation jobs and start my own business cleaning houses. And that not only gave me freedom, like time, because I would only clean for 5 hours max a day, because of it was intense labor. It was like 5 hours of power cleaning, so I could go to school later to do the other things I wanted. But that gave me so much freedom in terms of money, in terms of time. But I guess the drawing realization came later on when I realized that it's just something I couldn't help. Like, even if people try to make me not clean, it is impossible. I would always, it's just my natural thing. Nowadays, as an art handler, when I'm working in a big project with a crew of art handlers, I'm the one who is kind of picking everything up after everybody. So when we're done with the production, there is nothing to clean because everything is already kind of almost clean. So it's just realizing that perhaps cleaning and this obsession with organizing and keeping things tight, for some reason, is kind of like the way I am. Like, I cannot help it. Or even if you invite me to your house and we're friends, I kind of start like going into things and fixing things, and I have gotten a lot of times in trouble because of that. But some people love it, some people hate it. I have learned with the experience, because of my years now, that when I can do that and when I cannot do that, like.
So I'm thinking about like just family in general. And, we're both immigrants. So like, and we come from, parents, well, your mom, like, I'm thinking of like, how did they sort of react to when you were cleaning? Like, you know what I mean? Because I mean, the reason why like our parents and many parents of children, they come here for a better life, or they send their children here for a better life, and it's really like cleaning and these things are sort of like, that's not what you do when you're supposed to come here. I'm not criticizing them, I'm just saying, like, from their mentality, which
I totally understand the question, because
like, how do you sort of that, how does that, because it's such a big, it's a part of you, you know what I mean, and you're not ashamed of that. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that you actually probably feel proud of, like the fact that your parents work so hard. And I don't know, just all of that sort of comes to my brain.
No, I feel proud now because I was able to understand it when I did that work. That work of the line and the rags is the work that truly helped me resolve that. I don't know, that's not going to be an identity problem, but it really helped me resolve that, because I remember my parents were super upset about this thing of me cleaning houses, like even my sister, I have an older sister, she's still in Colombia, that basically she was kind of like my teacher throughout my whole life. And she's the one who kind of embedded education in us, in me and my brother. She's the one who made us read things, see theater, like go to like she's the one who expanded our minds growing up in Bogota when I was a teenager. So when I was telling her that I was going to clean houses, she was not happy at all. My mom couldn't understand, like she was like, no, I do this, so you don't have to do this. And my dad also, they were very upset. But at the end of the day, when one of the things I feel that has coming into the United States is that suddenly you gain a freedom that they don't have, and especially when you learn the language, when you learn to kind of drive yourself around and to open all the doors by yourself, they don't have a saying. So at the beginning, I felt very ashamed. It was very difficult for me to clean houses. I remember kind of being upset at myself, like, why do I do this?
Is it because you felt you were sort of like letting them down or something?
I felt like I was letting myself down. I felt like I gave up on myself in terms of, I mean, I was pursuing a career in the university already, and I pay for my own, like I pay my university, like since I'm 18, I pay for everything myself, everything, my trips or my car, my phone, everything. So I kind of felt that I was betraying myself, because, you know, I had kind of prepared myself to be an educated woman or whatever, but then I was there cleaning houses. And then I realized that is one of the things that I find most joy in life, actually. So because I started to take in this idea back to the drawing studio, you know, instead of, I kind of felt ashamed to talk about being an artist and being a housekeeper. You know, it was kind of like a disconnected conversation until I decided to bring, for example, I remember I'm obsessed with the side part of the toilet, you know, like that curve toilet. I'm obsessed. I love that that thing is clean. So I started to bring this idea of this obsession to this drawing studio. So I started drawing toilets and making drawings of actually watercolor, like scale to scale toilet watercolors, to then erase, to then wash them off. And so I started to combine, to kind of be very aware of not the movements and why dirty, why clean, all of this, right? So I guess when I did that, when I stopped the fight between myself, you know, when I was like, let's embrace it, let's deep, like go deep in it, is when things were started to be resolved. And it was realization. It was like a nice moment. So Carolina, I think I would love to meet you in person. And one more thing I want to ask you, do you think there is this, you know, because of our background and because of the things that we're talking about, is there, do you have any connection with our practice before becoming an artist, you know, like, because usually we don't have like the sample of someone else being an artist, you know, like we're kind of making our own.
Yeah, I mean, we only have less than 4 minutes. It's a long conversation. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've struggled for a very long time, probably until a couple of years ago, like just not really knowing, like it's not like when you study art or when you study or you're an artist, it's like something you just take off like your hat, like, oh, I'm a banker, I'm done being a CPA and I'm just going to live this other life now, you know. It's like you're just an artist. And my parents are supportive, but at the same time they have no idea what contemporary artists, they have no idea what artists, they don't know this art world, like art degree, what is that, you know. And it's for them, it's more, you know, they want us to have a secured life, like me and my sisters, and they want us to be financially stable, to have a income that's stable, all of these things. That an artist's life isn't really like that, to be honest. I think like there's a lot. I don't know if I'm gonna get like a bad rap for this, but I feel like there is a little bit of I don't know if you can have it all. You kind of have to compromise a little bit if you want to kind of be an artist. There's certain things in your life that you're like, well, I don't know if I want to do this because I'm on this like trajectory of this path that I want to explore. So you kind of have to almost not simplify your life, but, you know, have your focus. You kind of have to be focused.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of how we don't, and in terms of also the things that we've been seeing in the museum or the things that we've been seeing in the galleries for the past 20 years. I mean, I'm 33, so, you know, I started kind of seeing art when I was 13 to 14, and really realizing that a lot of the practices of the artists that I was seeing in the museum did not necessarily relate to my way of living at all, you know. So
Yeah.
it is, we are now creating that path, I feel, for people that maybe come from the same background. And I feel like that's a wonderful purpose in life. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like art in general, at least in Peru, like my family's from the Andes, you know, both of my parents. So they did like two migrations, you know, they migrated from the, from the Andes, and then they went to Lima, the city, and then they migrated to the United States. And the artisans is something that it's everywhere, like weaving, textiles, colors, all these expressiveness. It's just really natural, but it's very different here in kind of like in the US. It's really like more like you're going to be an artist it's just like more of a competition, I think, which I don't really like thinking about that, but it's just different, the types of perceptions that at least in my family growing up in the Andes and stuff, like them growing up in the Andes have compared to here.
How present is the craft in terms of like textile and ceramics and all of these?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, it's something that I think just the perception that I think indigenous cultures have is very different than like Western culture. And by that, I just mean, I guess, the US, because this is, I'm pretty Americanized in a lot of ways. I came when I was very young. I was 3 years old, even though I grew up in a very traditional Peruvian home. And I was saying, like, my family is from both my parents are from the Andes, and then they moved to the city. But it's almost like, my family or ancestors in Peru, lived a certain way, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. They were campesinos. That's what my family, my mom and my dad, were before, they had this idea of like progression and making yourself better, and this idea of like, not that they see anything wrong or down with where they're from or how they're living in like a campesino life. It's just that this idea, I guess, of growth or wanting more, and it goes with the word almost like civilization. But really, what does civilization mean? Like the civilization that we know is like destroying the planet, or like putting your will onto others. And in like the Andes, or like just maybe indigenous perceptions of life, is they're very much connected to nature. It's like they're really they have an intimate relationship with like the natural world. And it's this idea, I think, here in like the Western world that we have of like separation, and I think that's what really kind of messes us up a lot. It's like this idea of like, and I've gone through this my whole life of like, oh, I'm trying to find myself. I'm looking for myself. I'm not exactly where I'm not complete. And it's sort of like how society like sort of places this upon you, like this idea. And I think it's, even when you say like, I'm missing something, so I'm looking for a job, I'm looking for a career, I need to form a family because I'm incomplete, or I want to be somebody, or we say, oh yeah, I'm trying to become someone. And we actually use that, I'm trying to be somebody in life, right? We use those words. And I think like the Andean way of or perception is really like you're already complete within yourself, this idea of like, that separation is not there, whereas here it is. And I think, I think that's that has a huge like ripple effect on how one sort of lives their life, And I think a lot of us, we're kind of missing a big chunk. I mean, for one thing, like if you're talking about like colonized history or something, like where everything that it goes like the invisible labor that you're talking about, there's this invisible history that who makes history really, or like people that are rich or people that have control and power. So there's this huge there's a lot of stuff that's missing, but who decides these things, And it makes me think like, especially like in the Andes or just other indigenous cultures around the world, like, they live off the land, like everything they need is there. Like they live off the land. It provides food. It provides medicinal plants. They have water, all of these things. And you know, who is this labor for, right? Like even in your work with this invisible labor, the work that we do, like who is it for? Like what, you know, I'm not sure, like it makes me question a lot of things of not particularly to your work, but in general, like just labor in general and here in the Western world.
Yeah, and to me, when like to begin with, I didn't even want to come to the United States when I was 18, like I just grew up having everything in my mind but being here or learning English, or like it was not it was not a thing like that I planned or anything. It was more like my dad decided and kind of did it and brought us here. But for a long time I was kind of questioning all of that all the time, because in a way it felt complete, even though there wasn't that sense of, like, my parents had a sense of progress, because they both of them were already so disconnected from their indigenous ancestors, like they're probably third generation immigrants to the city. But like my grandmother was a farmer, and she's even spoke Spanish different than we did, because she comes from a town in Colombia where they have their own dialect, and growing up I used to hear her talking about like this very different way, and she still had that connection. We didn't have that connection anymore, and even when I came to the United States, that was completely destroyed. I remember just feeling miserable working in these white cubes, corporate settings with schedules and the cards and the timing and like all these things that I had no relationship to. So I think actually when I was here is when I decided to become an artist, because I refused to be just an employee like that. I was like, and I never thought that art was going to brought me rich, like, because I don't even sell my work. Up to this day, everything produce, I produce it with the money I make working, like being an art handler, basically. And now just recently kind of getting grants, that this is a new way for me to be like, okay, I'm not that alone. I don't have to work 6 months to raise, this money. Now I have the support of all these organizations. But I guess it was my decision of embracing that I was here, and taking the determination to root myself here, and within that question everything that happens around me all the time, in terms of how we live, how we work, how are we participating in this environment of art. So I can only resolve those questions through the artwork, really. But I think I'm actually studying right now the Mayan calendar, and kind of understanding the whole cosmology around that is completely different from the Catholicism that I was embedded, growing up. So
Yeah, just thinking about that idea of like progression. I always feel like people always are really extreme. Like when they think about that, it's either like you really have to leave it all behind, or you can't grow or move. Where there's so many like wisdom and just ancestral knowledge that I don't understand why we can't have it kind of like a hybridized or future. And I'm actually really interested in that, and I'm trying to work on some works relating to that, like space and inhabiting space, and sort of like this idea of like a white cube, or just like this room, like of kind of like, I guess, modernism and stuff, versus not versus, but lifestyle, or how we sort of interact with our spaces and our surroundings and stuff.
And which I think it's also a great thing for us to be doing as artists, it's having these ideas and put in these environments, these foreign environments into now the places where they belong, you know, like kind of recreating our own setups in a way, you know, the gallery setting, or museum setting, like all of these things. And I mean, for me, it's very difficult because I chose, in the art language, I chose minimalist conceptual art, which is not related at all with, you know, all these cosmologies that, you know, we have in our history. I kind of blame that because I was educated through the academic art world of the, you know, the Western world. So actually my first attempt when I did the black line, actually the reason why I got to do these works that are very repetitive and they're about endurance is because I started to get really into Zen Buddhism, you know. And I mean, I went to China and I was all the time questioning, like, what is a Colombian doing in Beijing? You know, but that was my search. Like, that's how I kind of, even though, you know, I cannot speak for any Zen school or anything, the you know, the things that I found in that practice kind of provided what my spiritual ancestral that were lost in time couldn't provide, you know, in this time. So that was my beginning, but now I'm going to the Mayan. I am very interested right now in that and really connecting with that. It's very interesting for me what I'm learning in that sense.
I mean, I feel there's a sense of healing in your work, you know. I mean, we can talk about like philosophical and like theory and all this kind of academia, but I do think like a lot of artists like make work from an emotional, you know, part, even if they're not necessarily and I personally have a hard time talking about my work because it's almost like language on top of language, like it's difficult, but I would say that your work, I find there's a sense of like healing and like trying to reconcile something, you know, like reconcile. Yeah. So I feel like it's there, like, you know, that sort of exploring and longing and just healing from.
Yeah, because I consciously made the decision about 5 years ago to stop playing the victim, you know, because that's all I knew. That's really all I, like, my parents, you know, my mom, all of these things we were always the pobrecitos, you know, like, poor you. And I was like, I cannot, like, I have to change my mindset. And it is painful, it is hard work, you know, it is very painful, it is a lot of hard work. It takes courage to do it, but it is the only way I have maintained myself sane with the cleaning. You know?
Sure. I feel so too. I feel like if I didn't have an art practice, or I'm just a lot, like, I just feel so much better when I'm making art, you know. Yeah, it's like when I'm not doing it, after a while I just get really, like, feel really lost, and like I'm just sad and kind of like depressed a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you.
I
mean, I think I don't know if we should continue. I mean, how do you feel?
I'm good. I think everything's good with me.
I think the next step for me will be to actually, like, for real, meet you, if we can hopefully do a studio visit and more, awesome. I think in person, more about the materials and the materiality of things. And like, I'm very curious to see how your life experience has manifested through the materials, because the first time I saw your work was at this exhibition with the sculpture and the painting, but I haven't, like, I would like to see more.
Awesome. Cool, me too. I mean, I know yours is more, you know, but yeah, I would love to have a studio visit with you.
Okay, Carolina, it was such a pleasure meeting you and having this conversation with you. and I hope we can meet soon.
Thank you, Natalie. It was awesome talking to you. I feel like, we had a connection here. So I'm very happy to have formally met you and talk and,
Yeah.
keep in
All
touch.
right. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.